All right, welcome everybody to this episode 85 of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am Anthony Ewing, as always, your host of the Navigating Now show. And we are joined today by another incredible leader, new to the Navigating Now network, Mary Dunlop. I will introduce Mary here in just a moment, but want to make sure that before we dive into the discussion today, we welcome everybody as part of the Navigating Now community. You know, our community continues to grow week over week as we bring you new leaders and new discussions every Thursday at 3 o'clock Central. We go live at thoughttium.com/live, Live. As well, we stream live to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and all social media channels. And we particularly want to welcome our LinkedIn community today. Our LinkedIn community is a very strong network of individuals that stop by the feed or maybe shoot us a comment after the show saying, hey, really enjoyed, the discussion and want to learn more. And that's really the value that we look to bring on a week-to-week basis with Navigating Now. Without further ado, I do want to introduce our guest for today. Our guest is Mary Dunlop. She is the founder of Forage and Roam. Forage and Roam, we think, is just a fascinating small business. We've had the pleasure of working with Mary over the course of the last few months. She is a friend. She's now a part of the network, and she also does some incredible work for us. Today is all about the role of design in small business. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And to all of us at Thoughttium as a design first or design centric consulting firm. We also believe that design is at the forefront of the makings of any great small business, and more so today than ever. And Mary, we know that you are in that work, that you are leading in that work. And so we're just really fortunate to have you at the table today to talk about the role of design in small business. Welcome to the table.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Okay, so let's get to know you first. We're going to kind of bookend this show with a little bit about Mary at the beginning, and then a little bit about who Mary is outside of work at the end of the show. That's something that we love to do as we bring people in, is get to know them more personally. But first and foremost, Mary, tell us a little bit about Forage and Roam and the type of work that you do there.
Absolutely. So with Forage and Roam, the work is pretty broad. I'm not going to lie. I'm personally just very interested in a lot of different things. So I try not to limit myself too much in the type of work I do, but obviously the style of my work and the style of my design is carried through no matter what kinds of projects I'm working on. So mainly working with other small businesses in the area or elsewhere in America and helping them kind of solidify their brands, launch merchandising lines, or just help with one-off projects if they're, wanting to do a t-shirt to sell in their new shop or whatever the case may be. And then also do a lot of large scale projects. So I'm really interested in doing signage and murals and things like that. So my design definitely kind of runs the gamut, but there's a kind of a thread of kind of vibrant colors and organic shapes that kind of run through all of the different work that I do.
Yeah, and we've seen your work in action, and we feel it's very unique. On your website and the way that we've seen you describe yourself, you say that you are a graphic designer, a hand letterer, and a muralist. And I just think that's so interesting, because it's one thing to say I'm a designer or I'm a graphic designer, graphic artist. It's another to be very specific about the type of work that you put out in the public domain. So what came first, the graphic designer, the hand letterer, or the muralist?
Yeah, that's a great question. I went to school for graphic design and then I minored in advertising. So that's definitely like the root of of kind of how I started was formal graphic design. So layout, branding, just kind of everything is associated with that. And then I think once you get out of college, you're kind of confronted with how broad graphic design or the world of design is. And then you have to start kind of figuring out what niche to get into or what you also enjoy, right? Because if you're just getting into a niche because it's really trendy or popular, you're probably not going to have a lot of sustainability long term in that, because that's not something you're naturally gravitating towards. So I think I spent the first few years out of college just kind of being like, oh, what am I naturally interested in? What projects, when I get assigned them or when I get hired to do them, am I like really, really interested in? And I started paying attention to that over the years and just found that challenging myself in those things led naturally to me being really interested in hand lettering and murals. Even though those seem very different, I think the things that kind of the common thread through most of my work is that I get to do a lot of it by hand. And I think that's a little bit unique for most designers. A lot of designers do some sketches or some preliminary stuff, by hand, but mainly they're doing digital work. And I think I kind of work the opposite, where I do a lot of things by hand and I enjoy that tangible process a lot. And so that's led me into kind of the niche of where I am now.
How does the analog form, like, why is that so important to you? That you're working with your hands?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not really sure if there's an answer to that, just except for like, that's how I grew up. I grew up like drawing a lot, and I just naturally gravitated towards that. I would say in school, we definitely were taught in university to like always start with sketches. They're like, you're going to waste a lot of time if you try to jump straight onto the computer and create something because you don't have your idea formed yet. So that was definitely taught to me, but I think I just took it a step further with feeling like when I put my actual strokes into work and when I put the actual like natural curves that I draw into my work, it feels better and it feels more like me. And so over the years, it's just kind of how my process has developed.
Yeah. And you've got to almost respect that process above anything, as a creator, as a designer. I've just learned when working with such talented designers that, the process is everything. So, and I want to maybe get into that a little bit later, but, today's episode is all about the impact of design and how small business owners and entrepreneurs, even folks within large organizations, can bring more design into the way that they work and the way that they do work and the way that they, create value for their organizations. I want to talk about the impact of design on small businesses, because I think there's a lot of folks in our community that are either part of a small business, running a small business, or have aspirations to build a business. And, I think there are varying perspectives on how early you bring brand into and design into the kind of building a foundation of a firm, and kind of how to invest and when to invest in this. So let's talk about that for a little bit. How do you typically work with brands, and at what point in the life cycle of an organization are you seeing brands kind of reach out and say, hey, I want to put a logo together, or I want to learn more about how design might impact the growth of my brand or my company?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. I would say, even though I am a graphic designer, I would say it's really important not to start immediately with design. And I think the reason for that is because if you have no idea who you are as a company yet, you're going to waste a lot of time talking to a designer and trying to figure out, like, the design in essence is supposed to reflect who you are as a company and what your mission is and what your, who you want to reach and your demographic. So if you don't have any of that stuff figured out yet, then you're going to be kind of feeling a little lost in the design process of how to convey something that you don't really quite understand yourself. So I would say it's important to establish yourself a little bit first, meaning figuring out who your audience is and kind of what your mission as an organization is first. As far as when people come to me, that's really up in the air. Like, if I had to recommend a time to them, that would be something for sure. But usually people are coming to me when they feel it's right for them. So that just depends a lot. I mean, some businesses, a few months or a year in, are coming and talking about a logo. Some people already have a lot of that already established and they're wanting some updates, or they're just wanting to add kind of an additional layer to their business, whether that be like something that you can buy in their store or something, something like that. So it really it varies from business to business.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. Maybe I'll give a little bit of personal experience in terms of, the very early impact of design and graphic arts in the development of Thoughtium. So as much as I am, have been really focused on building this business, I knew very early on that whatever business I grew, I wanted to build a brand outside of the business, so that as the business evolved and as we took on more people and brought in more interest and potentially created new products and new service lines, the brand could, was big enough and broad enough to be able to absorb it. The brand based more on the way we like to work and our values, and a lot less on very specific value proposition or offerings. And so we brought in design very early on, as early as like the first few weeks of the concept of Thoughtium. Prior to even starting an LLC, I sat down with a graphic artist and talked a little bit about what I was trying to create, and a lot about how that would essentially exist out in the open marketplace. Now, again, I'm a very highly creative, highly visual person. So one of the most exciting things about starting a business for me was to be able to build a brand and to support that brand with great design. I do understand not everybody thinks that way. At the same time, what I realized was that if you could build a visual, let's call it anchor or vessel for an idea that you have, oftentimes it will support continued investments in building this out. It will hold you almost accountable to continue to kind of like reach that look and feel. And in many ways, it allows you to communicate your value proposition a lot earlier than most people are maybe thinking about it, which would be a couple of years in once they've got a fully vetted, business and value proposition. So, for us, Thoughtium was an early concept in 2016. And we sat down with a phenomenal creative artist by the name of Carrie Bergen. She lives in Napa Valley, and ironically, she was designing exclusively for wine companies. She designed wine labels. And I met her through my personal network, and we just really hit it off. And she said, well, I'll take you on as a client. It'll be my first non-beverage client. But the work that she did to bring Thoughtium to life through the mark, through the branding, and through our brand guidelines very, very early on, like really, really shaped our direction. And so I maybe want to emphasize the very early impact and role that design can have in the development of a new business.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, sorry.
Yes. No,
that's okay. I definitely agree with that. I think that what I would try to encourage people not to do is jump into that before they have an idea. And I think that that's exactly what you're saying. Like, you knew where you were going. And so you knew when the design would align with that and when it wouldn't. And I think that that's very important to kind of almost that marriage of like, where you're going, maybe not 100%, but you knew your mission and your goals, and then seeing that come to life visually kind of help propel that more and more.
Yeah, I love that. So let's say that you're working with a or I'm a small business. I've got an idea. I've even got maybe a little bit of a proven business model, but unlike me, I don't have a creative bone in my body. And so, Mary, I'm coming to you and Forage and Roam, and we're sitting down and having like these early conversations. How do you work with your clients to develop some of like the early creative aspects or elements of a brand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think it's twofold. I think one part is kind of when someone has no idea, right? They just know they need something, and that's kind of where it ends. I think spending some time talking about, okay, well, like, what is your goal in your brand, and who, where you're going to be, and where is this logo going to be physically, right? Like, all brands have obviously your brand is not just your logo, but usually that's where it starts. And so all brands have lots of different applications, right? Nike's logo is on clothing. It's this big, it's huge. And so that's like what I like to consider is like, okay, when you are putting your branding out, what kind of applications is it going to be in the most? And then also talking about the process from my point of view. So I also like to acknowledge the fact that if you're coming in and hiring a graphic designer and you know little to nothing about graphic design, that process might be very intimidating to you. And so from my end, I always try to be really clear about, okay, these are the steps it's going to look like when we're working together. This is what to expect. You can always feel free to ask me questions or, show me examples of things that you like to kind of kickstart the process. So I like to make sure that they know that this is like kind of a team effort and it's not just like a scary designer sitting somewhere doing the work for them. So
yeah. And are there a core set of, critical assets or things that you work with clients on? Like, is it always just a logo, or do you talk to your clients about things outside of the logo that they should be thinking about very early on in the process?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Logo is just one thing. Honestly, I think that it can dictate a little bit the style of where you're wanting to go with the rest of your branding, but in no way is it the only thing that's important. I think just understanding what type of business you have and what your user experience is going to dictate a lot of that stuff. So I know that's kind of broad, but like if you're a product-based company and you're sending out products to people, that's going to dictate the type of design you need to implement, whether it be, your packaging, the process. A lot of design and branding is not just the physical design, it's also the experience you have with the company and with your ordering process and things like that. So those are all things to consider as well. If you're just a service or you're maybe a completely like web or digital based service, those are all going to be different suggestions. So I think personally, I just take in the scope of their business first, and then I'll make suggestions based on that.
Okay. And, do you try to stay within certain industries? And I guess the inverse of that is, as I'm thinking about bringing, a graphic designer in or a design firm, should I be looking for artist designers that work in specific industries? Is that something that you do? Or is there value in kind of diversifying your portfolio? Like, tell me how you keep your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So I prefer to work in all sorts of industries. I don't really feel like I should be in one specific area. So I've worked with, I've worked with jewelry companies. I've worked with coffee companies, tea companies. I've worked with theaters. I've worked with lots of different types of businesses. And for me, it's not as important as what industry you're in as much as it is what is the style of communication that you want to put out. If your company is something that's very, very, streamlined and luxury and like very high end, I'm probably not going to be the person for you. Just because my style is very playful and very kind of innocent and joyful. And over the years, that's just what I've always naturally gravitated towards. So I'd say if you are someone trying to hire a designer, probably the more important thing to look at is not so much what industries they've been in, is what is the common thread through their design. You should be able to kind of see a style present, even though that's obviously going to manifest different in different projects. But overall, a designer is going to have a style. And does that style feel like that's something that can align with your brand?
Got it. And as I'm, thinking about starting to work with a designer, are there things that I should have or things that I should prepare in order to have, kind of those first few conversations that allow you to get a lot closer to my brand and what I'm trying to accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just be willing to answer a lot of questions. That's how I enter relationships with clients, is just asking a lot of questions around maybe problems they've had in the past, or why are you even coming to me? Just the reason why they're coming to a designer is probably going to answer a lot of questions. And then just being able to, if you have a style in mind, definitely bring that to the table like as soon as possible. Maybe not something like, I want my whatever to look exactly like this. But if you have a style you really, really gravitate towards, I would definitely bring that to the designer studio rather than later, because there's nothing more frustrating than like kind of going down a path as a designer and then realizing like that's not what the client wanted, but that was never discussed. So just being clear, like if you do have expectations of what something will look like, just, you know, coming at that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, those are really, really good tips. So we're talking about the role and the impact of design on small business. And you know, we've talked a lot about kind of the process that you know, we follow in terms of, you know, working with designers. We talked about, you know, some of the questions that, you know, Mary will ask very early on when working with new clients and vice versa. We also talked about how early to bring design to the table and what to think about very early on in the process. Mary, once you know, work with, let's say, a small business or a brand, and you create those like foundational elements, what are ways that you continue to work with clients and extend that relationship so that you're able to continue to kind of raise the bar for your clients and with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is kind of how do I continue to work with the same clients and continue
Yes.
that vision? Yeah, absolutely. I found personally a lot of my clients are return clients. Like I work with the same people for many years. And I think one of the reasons for that is just that I like to make sure that the expectations or like what's expected is going to be really clear up front, because there's nothing more frustrating for me as a designer or for you as a client to be like, I don't really know where we are in the process.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. And so I think for me, it's really important just to be like, all right, this, like, let's have a meeting at the start. Let's talk about what you're interested in accomplishing through this, you know, period of time we're working together. And then kind of be clear about, okay, this is my next step. This is your next step. And I think people, when we wrap that up and when I make sure that they have all the information they need, I think I like to think about my communication from a non-design perspective. So I think like if I was getting this email about the files I'm sending you, about the applications you can use them in, and you are not a designer, this might be kind of intimidating or overwhelming to you. And so I always try to communicate with my clients in a way where if you know almost nothing about design, you're still going to have an idea of what you need to do moving forward. And I think that makes my clients so comfortable, and then they want to work with me again in the future.
Yeah, well, speaking of working with you, I wanted to share a little bit of work that that we've done with Mary and for her firm, Forage Roam. You know, we were brought to Mary through one of our own employees that has done some work with Forage Roam and just had some incredible things to say. And you know, we love designers. We over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, design has really been at the forefront of a lot of our offerings. You think about something like, you know, consulting services, which can be very nebulous. It can be very high level. You know, we design strategy, we do leadership development, we do sales training. But at the end of the day, you know, our services are only as good as the point of impact and how they land with our customers. And ultimately, that is in a tangible, visual deliverable. And we've worked with designers in the consulting world to make sure that our deliverables are representative of the value that is, you know, has been delivered over the course of months and sometimes years with clients. We've worked with designers to make sure that our value proposition is very clear. We've done pitch decks. We've branded specific offerings within the Thoughttium consulting suite of consulting services, which also has given us a lot more visibility and scalability of what we do on a day-to-day basis. But we came to Mary with a very particular kind of challenge. And the challenge was that we wanted to create something that could live in perpetuity within our community in a very, very unique way. And that project was called the Create the Space Project. And ultimately, it resulted in a piece of art that we worked with Mary to develop. That piece of art represented a very specific experience that we were delivering a small cohort of individuals. And that art is in the form now of an NFT. And when we went to Mary and we said, hey, you know, what do you know about NFTs? And you know, are you in this space? We weren't expecting her necessarily to say, oh my gosh, I know everything about it. And I'm cranking out digital art and I'm on OpenSea and I'm, because we knew that that wasn't necessarily the type of work that Mary was doing, but what she had was a very open mind. What she had was a willingness to kind of step in and explore with us. And ultimately what she did was she very quickly captured, the spirit and the essence of this dinner that we were hosting and how we wanted to commemorate it through a piece of visual art. And you can see the NFT that was minted at the end of February. And Mary and Forage and Roam, helped us bring this to life. Tell us a little bit about, your experience with this project, Mary, and, maybe ways that it might have stretched you or, ways that you're thinking about, this project as it pertains to how you might work with other clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the biggest challenge with this project was just the turnaround time for it. However, I know we spoke before about it and we spoke about how there is some benefit to not overthinking things, right? Just being like, hey, here's our vision. Let's run with this. Let's not get caught up in all of the details or get caught up in, rehashing things over and over again. And I think sometimes when you just jump into a project, it comes out a little bit more organically or a little bit more true to who we are and what the vision for the project is because we haven't overthought it a bunch. So I think that's why this project was so successful is because we kind of just jumped in. We're like, hey, you guys told me like, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is the theme of this event. And then we just kind of jumped in with that. So I think as you grow as a designer, you can more quickly associate different things with themes. And I know that's a little bit vague, but you just learn how to bring in themes to your designs without it being overtly, kind of stereotypical, if that makes sense. So I think that's what I try to do with this project is you told me, what the theme was. You said you wanted that word in the work a little bit in some way. So of course, like as hand lettering is part of my main thing I do as a designer, I wanted to bring it in with hand lettering and then just incorporate the different things that I considered part of like the Greek theme of the event. So I brought in constellations that are tied in with Greek mythology. And then I was like, all right, I'm doing constellations. Let's bring in some planets. I can't remember what that the logo you use for the Create the Space, which is the 4 circles.
Yep.
But I was like, all right, I want to bring that in, but bring it in a way that doesn't feel out of place for the theme, which is like kind of, okay, we're doing a space theme now. So I was like, you know what, I'll just make those planets and it'll kind of loosely evoke the logo that's used for these things, which I thought was a fun way to do that. And then I was thinking about some other imagery and I was like, in Greek, Greek history, we use like the laurel, which is like, in the Olympics and different things like that. So it's like, what, a lot of planets have that halo. I can't remember what the official term is called for that, but a little ring around the planet. So it's like, what, I'm going to do kind of like a fun play on that and make the laurel part of the planetary, the planet design in the middle. So that was kind of my thought process around it. So it's like, how can I bring in this theme and kind of make it feel like very clear what the theme is without it being like super stereotypically, Greek.
Yeah. And I'll just double down on the fact that, Mary had to create this. I believe we had maybe like a 48-hour turnaround time from concept to implementation, or maybe it was 72 hours. And again, this is, we're talking about the impact of design on small businesses. This is something that, we couldn't even have come close to producing something like this. And for those of us who, are into Web3 and the role of NFTs and how NFTs are developing, it really does start with great artwork. And so, we were at a point where, we thought that it was going to be a disservice to the project for us to put something forward that we generated in Canva or was some part of some sort of like stock, imagery. And so we went to Mary and we said, we've got a very short period of time, but we know you're really good and we'd love to have you put something together. And everything that she just went through was her process over the course of a very short, very restricted period of time. And from that, and I love the fact that like we just gave Mary complete carte blanche. There was, I think, very few rounds of feedback. we got such an incredible artifact that was, something that everybody, left the dinner with. It really represented the essence of the evening, and it will commemorate this cohort of 8 people for years to come, through this NFT. And so all of that to be said, there was so much design in that whole experience. There was designing the physical experience of bringing these people together for the dinner. There was designing the NFT project by way of what everybody gets by coming to this dinner and having received this NFT. And then there was the front face of this, which I would consider maybe one of the most important pieces of this, which is, when I look at this, do I have that feeling or that evocation of emotion of sitting at that table with 6 or 8 of my peers and sharing the discussion, and the discussion being kind of elevated and abstract? That's exactly what this NFT and this piece of art did for that experience. And for that, Mary, I again just want to thank you. You've been such a big part of this incredible project that we launched in February, and we look to host one of these dinners every quarter. You can learn more about the program at thoughtteam.com/NFT, and you can even see a little bit more about specifically what went into the artwork here. So thank you so much, Mary, for jumping in, right, and showing that creative confidence that we're always challenging our clients to come to their work with.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I want to do a quick lightning round. Are you up for a quick lightning round before we sign off? This has become almost a fan favorite. We go through, I ask you a series of maybe 6 or 7 short questions. This allows our team and our network to get to know you a little bit better as an individual. And we'll start with the question we love to ask people. What are you reading, watching, or listening to right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had a hunch. I was like, he's probably going to ask me what book I'm reading. So reading this book right here, it's called The Comfort Book. It's by an author called Matt Haig. And it's really just kind of an excerpt of a collection of different thoughts that he's had through the years, but he is also the author of The Midnight Library, if you've heard of that. And I read The Midnight Library first, and I loved kind of just his play on life and kind of the meaning of relationships and the meaning of all the different lives that we can live and how they all could be really amazing. So I decided to read another book that he had written, and he has a lot of themes of like hope, and he talks a lot about mental health, which is something that's really important for me. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Love that. Outside of graphic design, hand lettering, doing murals, or doing any client work, what's maybe 1 or 2 of your alternative creative outlets?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've realized recently most of the things I do for fun are creative in some way. Which means I probably picked the correct field. I like to just try a lot of different mediums, honestly. So I'm always trying new things. Like last year, I was like, I'm going to get into embroidery and see how I feel about that. And then this year, I'm like, I'm going to get a little bit more into painting. So those are some creative things, but those are specifically still art. I would say I also enjoy dance a lot. I don't get to do it as much as I want to, but that's also a creative endeavor that I feel like really anything we do as people kind of feeds into anything else. So I feel like all of my other outlets kind of also help me as a designer because I see the world a little bit more broadly.
That's incredible. I love that. When you are in the middle of a project, in the middle of your workday, and you lift your head up from the computer or the desk or the pad of paper or the sketch pad, and you look outside and you're kind of gazing or daydreaming, what are you thinking about?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I'm definitely an analyzer. So I'm either thinking about a problem I need to solve, which is the boring answer. But if I'm not thinking about that, then I'm probably thinking about where I'm going to go next, because I really enjoy traveling. So I'm always thinking about like, where could I go take an adventure?
Yeah, I think in your bio on your website, I thought it was kind of cool because I think you said something like, I enjoy A, B, C, D, and then you said, and I enjoy like overthinking. Or you said like, I'm good at overthinking. And I'm like, oh, I can totally relate to that as well too.
It's something it's kind of a strengths weakness thing. So it's like,
It totally is.
I think it helps me out a lot, but sometimes.
Yeah, it totally is. You are a 16th century artist, and it's well before the digital era or really any technology whatsoever. You're commissioned to spend the majority of your working years on a single project. Like, what medium are you working on? What project is that? Like, what type of art are you doing? You can do one thing for the rest of your career. What is that?
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. So this can be any creative project that's not digital.
Yep.
Set design.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. Are you doing any of that today?
What?
Are you doing any of that today? Set design?
I'm not. No, that's not. That's
Okay.
That's something like, I think the modern version of that besides set design would be like window display, just like physically creating spaces and experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which goes back
or
to
like
doing things by hand.
Yeah, I was gonna say like or like another modern version of that would be like creating great Pinterest boards or something like that, just like arranging things visually. But set design, I can imagine being extremely gratifying. Okay, last question. I want you to think about something that you admire about yourself and fill in the blank. If the world were a lot more like me, it would be what?
Ooh. I would say thoughtful. I think just
Thoughtful.
kind of like self-reflection, and then outwardly kind of using that as a tool to be kinder and like more empathetic towards other people.
Love that. I love that. Well, Mary, we've been thrilled to get to know you and your work at Forage and Roam. I know you have a few particular huge fans of yours here within Thoughttium. We're so honored and excited to have you at the forefront of our very evolving NFT project. And I hope that our community got a lot from this discussion in terms of how we can bring brand into building a small business. How can people find you and learn a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the best place is on Instagram at Forage and Roam. And then also just checking out my website, Forage and Roam, or shooting me an email if you have questions about this talk. Definitely love to engage with people.
Awesome. Mary, thank you so much for joining today. We hope to have you back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Okay, as we close things up here, I want to remind everybody that we are live every Thursday afternoon at 3:00 Central. Next week, episode 86, I will be joined with my business partner, co-founder Norm, our fearless chief of staff, Amanda, and we're going to pause kind of in the middle of a really busy Navigating Now season, and we're going to talk about how we have been building and managing community over the course of the last couple of years, and particularly over the last 6 months, as our community building has really picked up with the introduction of a couple of new community platforms. And we feel very responsible to share the process and the journey that we're going through in building Thoughttium. And a big part of that is in community design, community development, and community management. And so we'll be sharing some of the tips and tricks and some of the lessons that we've learned over the course of the last few years. Excited to sit alongside Amanda and Norm next week. All of our episodes can be found at thoughttium.com/live. We hope everybody has an awesome Thursday afternoon, and we'll see you all next week. So long.